There are 35 adoptive families waiting for every infant that is placed for adoption. So you have two desperate parties, which breeds the environment for unethical behavior. So I want to make sure that I equip you with questions to suss out which agencies are operating ethically and which are not. Hello there, ladies, and welcome back if you are along for the journey already. And if you're not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Today, I am going to take you through the basics of expectant mother expenses, also known as birth mother expenses. I'm going to go over the average cost of birth mother expenses, what expectant parent expenses can and usually do consist of, and the questions you should be asking your agency to make sure that they are being ethical and legal around expectant mother expenses. Let's jump in. First off, what could be a qualifying expense for a expectant mother or expectant parent expense? And I'm using the phrase expectant parent, I should use, because that is technically the correct term to use before a mother has signed relinquishment forms. After that, you can call them birth parent expenses, but up until then, they're technically expectant parent expenses. I will do my best to remember that during this video, but please forgive me if I slip up, just like my phone almost slipped off. Expectant parent expenses fall into four major categories: maternity care, pre and post birth, living expenses, again, pre and post birth, counseling fees and legal fees, as well as travel, food, and meals and accommodations to and from legal proceedings. We'll dive into each one of those in a little more detail in a minute, but I wanted to go over the general costs. Now, I will leave the link down below. I have linked it in my adoption cost video as well, but this is the most robust set of data I could find around the actual average cost of adoption, and they do break it out with a few categories that qualify as expectant mother expenses. There's three categories really on this website that qualify as what you would expect to be covered under expectant parent expenses. First is just a straight up category called birth mother expenses. The next is birth mother counseling, and the other is attorney fees. I'm not going to include attorney fees because technically those could be the adoptive family's attorney fees as well. The other two categories total about $4,750 on average. That means they account for about 10% of the total average cost of adoption when this survey was conducted, which was $43,000. But adoption expenses vary wildly, and one of the biggest categories that vary is the expectant parent section. So you need to set a budget with your adoption agency up front so they don't show you situations that you simply can't afford. Some agencies do offer protection around birth mother expenses, and that's one of the questions you should be asking them is how much of your money is at risk should you experience an adoption disruption. But the first question you should add to your list to find an ethical adoption agency is asking them if the birth mother gets to retain the amount that was paid to her for living expenses and medical expenses should she choose to parent. Some agencies will let you recoup the cost of your expenses because the birth mother or birth family has to pay them back. And that is coercion. Financial stress is one of the major components of a birth family deciding to place their child for adoption. Saying that you will pay their expenses if they place their child for adoption is not legal, and it is coercion, and you want to make sure you are not working with an agency that supports that. You are not allowed to pay a mother for her child. That's illegal. That being said, obviously adoption is risky. It's not a surefire thing, and I know a lot of you are coming to adoption from infertility, which you already know is a risky way. Infertility treatments is a risky way to grow your family, and it needs to be said that adoption is also risky. There are certain expenses that could be gone and lost, and you have to accept that before walking down this path. I want to take a moment and talk about the fact that financial hardship is often a motivator. I'm going to have a whole video of adoption myths, which is going to address what a typical birth family looks like, but there's always the argument, and I think I've even gotten in the comments, well, why don't you just give them the money? Wouldn't it be better to give an expectant family the money and then they could parent their child? And I will let Ashley from Lifetime Healing touch on that more. She's a birth mother who placed her son, I think 13 years ago. But she explains why, a pregnancy is only just one part of their story, one part of the chaos they're usually experiencing. And without the proper tools and education, just throwing more money at it won't help long term. You can help them, Anyway, I'm going to just stop. She does a much better explanation of it. I will leave a podcast where she talks about it down below. She starts talking about this particular part of birth mother expenses around minute 20. So you can go talk to her, because I feel like it's not my place to explain why, money isn't just the answer in a video where we're talking about money. That being said, one of the fees that you should be on the lookout for is birth mother counseling, because this is key for breaking this cycle. And I love how Ashley explains this. She says if you're not offering them, financial classes around how to budget and invest, if you're not offering them counseling on birth control, if you're not offering them a way to get out of abusive relationships, then this is just a cycle that's going to keep repeating, and we don't want that as well. So ask your agency what counseling services they offer, and if that's part of the fees that you pay, because that is an important part of just healing for them and also improving their life and not taking advantage of them in a desperate situation. Speaking of counseling, mental health counseling is something that should be offered pre and post placement. Dig in with your agency. Ask them who's footing the bill for that and how long it goes. How many weeks and months before can they access that? Do they have to choose an adoption plan before they have access to counseling? They really should have it before they make an adoption plan to work through those emotions. And how many weeks after? Obviously, you don't want to leave a woman who's postpartum just place their child with no mental health resources. So ask them, dig in, ask how many weeks post-placement they offer counseling. I got a little off tangent on the whole counseling thing. Let's go back to the top. What are reasonable medical expenses? These are all her prenatal appointments. This is also transportation if she does not have them to those appointments. I know some agencies actually offer to take birth mothers to and from those appointments to make sure that they get there. This is all of her expenses up until delivery, up until those papers are signed. All of the expenses related to the baby will automatically and always be the responsibility of the adoptive family. But her expenses up through delivery and her stay in the hospital can be included in the medical expenses for the expectant mother expenses. But most birth mothers will either have private insurance or have Medicaid. Another question you should ask your agency to make sure that they are handling these expenses ethically is to ask them, are they getting these families on Medicaid? And if so, what expenses are expected after that? And can they verify that? Can they show you proof of that? Can they show you a bill, an itemized bill? Itemized bills are a big thing. Let's move on to the next category, living expenses. Do not partner with an agency that just has lump sum payments to expectant families. Ask them for an itemized list, because the court will ask you for an itemized list with receipts. So are they just giving them $2,000 for expenses, or are they paying their rent? Are they paying their utilities? Are they paying their phone and car? Like, what are they paying for? Can they provide you a list? Are they reimbursing her as those expenses come in? That's another great way. But lump sums tend to not go where they're expected and tend to raise some flags with the courts. So please ask your agencies, will I be provided an itemized list at the end of this adoption for all of the expectant mother expenses? That being said, the court is a little bit vague on the caps or what is qualified as normal living expenses. They use the word reasonable, which can be interpreted. Most states have a cap either on the monthly amount or the total amount of expectant mother expenses, so you will have to consult with an adoption agency or attorney in your area to find out those caps. Living expenses also are capped by date post-placement. So depending on, again, which state you live in, is how many weeks postpartum they let you pay for living expenses. Most of them fall between 6 and 8 weeks, but it does also depend on your state and what type of delivery she had, C-section versus vaginal. So go ahead, again, consult with attorney to figure out how many weeks post-placement you can expect to be paying for expectant mother expenses. And I hinted at it earlier, but the reason that we're making this video is because adoption has, by its nature, usually 2 very desperate parties. You have expectant mothers who need help. They need help with their family, either because they're in an abusive situation or because they're financially strapped or because this would be detrimental to their other children they already have, or all of the above. They're in a desperate situation looking for help. And then a lot of times you have desperate adoptive families who just want to grow their family. There are 35 adoptive families waiting for every infant that is placed for adoption. So you have 2 desperate parties, which breeds the environment for unethical behavior. So I want to make sure that I equip you with questions to suss out which agencies are operating ethically and which are not. I'm going to give you a quick rundown. Gonna read them off my phone, please excuse. Ask if you're going to get a breakdown of the costs and the receipts, not just lump sums paid to birth mothers. Make sure that they are billing Medicaid and not also charging you. Are they paying providers directly or offering reimbursements? Do they fly mothers from out of state into the state where they're operating? Gonna make a small point here. If you are in Utah, please be extra careful. They have an abundance right now of unethical agencies that are flying birth mothers in from other states because Utah is an adoption-friendly state, which just means it protects adoptive parents more. In Utah, you don't have to do any work around terminating parental rights of the father. He's just not in the picture, not informed, doesn't matter. They're also flying families in to ignore ICPC, which is the Interstate Pact for adoption, saying, that both courts have to agree that this adoption can take place. But if she gives birth in Utah, then, and I'm saying Utah because it's notorious and in the news right now, but any state could operate this way, flying them in so the child is born there so they can avoid the court system for the state where the mother is actually from. And also, this leads to this really icky practice of flying them in, putting them up in a hotel, but if they decide to parent, making them find their own way home or putting them on a bus home. So they'll fly them in, but if they decide to parent, screw you kind of, and they send them home and So make sure they're not doing that. In summary, back to my questions. What counseling offerings are you giving expectant mothers around mental health, finance, birth control, health, getting out of abusive relationships? And finally, what are you doing to vet out family coercion? Sometimes for moral, religion, cultural reasons, families do not want their unwed or young daughters, having babies, and they will tell them that adoption is the only way. Obviously, that is literally like the history of adoption in the United States, so it's still present. Ask them what they're doing to vet out coercion, to make sure that this expectant family wants to make an adoption plan and isn't just being pressured by their family. So those were the basics of expectant mother expenses. I highly recommend checking out the podcast down below. Again, Ashley is a birth mother, so she has a much more firsthand view of this. She didn't actually take any expectant mother expenses during her adoption, but she has worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of birth mothers since then in making sure that they have Lifetime Healing, which is the name of her organization. So go ahead, that's linked down below. And until next time, ladies, keep on fighting.